Hello and welcome to this Mirror Facebook Live, all about the big changes coming down the tracks for income tax, universal credit, state pension, and much, much more following the Chancellor's autumn statement today. I'm Sam Barker, a money reporter at the Mirror. Today, I'm joined by the Mirror Online political editor, Dan Bloom, who will be helping take us through this crucial subject. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
And Dan joins us from the corridors of power themselves. So we're going to be taking you through an awful lot today, all the changes to your money, from tax rises, changes to benefits, along with many, many other topics. There really is an awful lot to get through, so much so that we may not get it all into this session, but we will do our utmost. But we're also here to answer your questions. So if you have anything at all that you would like to ask us, or you just want to have your opinion heard, please do feel free, post it in the comment section. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll jump on questions as they come in and answer as many of them as we can. So Dan, to kind of kick things off, let's talk about the context. Why are all these big changes happening? What's the bigger political picture, please?
Well, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng had the kamikaze budget, if you remember, barely kind of 2 months ago. That all fell apart. It had billions and billions of pounds of unfunded tax cuts. And what we've got now is a lot of tax rises. So the general picture is kind of two things. There's the tax rises, a lot of which are stealth rises, which are happening kind of in 2027, 28. Not all of them. Some of them are things like council tax, which we'll get to later. That's kicking in April. And then on the spending cuts, that's what's really interesting politically. He's kind of announced a new era of austerity, Jeremy Hunt, today, but he hasn't announced it yet. What he's saying is, I'm going to keep spending plans as they were, which is only just rising in real terms up till 2025. And then after that, he's going to cut something like £7 billion. I'm looking at the book, and then 14 billion the next year, and then 22 billion the next year in sort of this normal day-to-day government spending. That's colossal amounts of cuts. And what he's doing is he's passing that on to whoever's going to be chancellor until 2025. And if, you know, the fact that we've had 3 prime ministers since 2019, it makes you think that he might not be in his job by then, and he might be, as Rachel Reeves put it, laying a trap for Labour. So that's the context, and then onto the detail. That's when it really matters for you, the readers.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dan, for sort of taking us through the background, the sort of the context to all this. Just going to take a very quick question from Lorraine Summers. Hello, thank you very much, Lorraine. Lorraine says, are there going to be any more cost of living payments? Yes, there are, and stay tuned because we're going to take you through everything that's coming down the tracks on that one. Now, to kind of get things rolling with some of the Chancellor's big announcements today, Dan, I understand there's been some good news for people on the state pension and benefits like universal credit.
Yes, so after a long hokey cokey where they promised it would rise by inflation and then didn't, and then did, and then didn't, they will rise by inflation next April. That's 10.1%, lower than inflation is at the moment, I should say. It's now 11.1%, but rises by what inflation was in September. So I think they said that would be a rise of about £870 over the year on the state pension. I don't have the benefit claimants in front of me, but I think we worked out that on the standard allowance of universal credit, sort of base rate, it's something like £15 extra a month. It's obviously more than that because people get top-ups for housing and childcare and that kind of thing. So that is the kind of good news, if you like, for people on pensions benefits. There is some bad news for people on benefits hidden in there, though, which I think I should just mention. There's a lot more of a crackdown on things, not just fraud, but on people who are deemed to not be working long enough hours for the DWP's liking. So, as we know, 2 million people or more who are on universal credit also have a job. They're just not paid enough to bring them out of poverty. And 600,000 of those people who work kind of part-time, but pretty substantial, like 25 hours a week, are now going to be summoned for meetings with the job centre and be told, how are you trying to increase those hours? And if they don't attend those meetings, they could have their benefits stopped. So that is a real crackdown that's coming soon. On the other hand, they've taken a move to move people on disability benefits onto universal credit and delayed it by 4 more years to 2028, which is basically almost saying it won't happen by the standards of today's politics. So there's a kind of almost like a carrot and stick approach there, if you like, that is going on at the moment.
I'm with you, and I think it's millions and millions of pounds more on catching what the government would call sort of benefits cheats as well. It seems to be a sort of a narrative of get back into work. Do you really deserve it? Stop being idle when it comes to benefits like universal credit. Unfortunately, now to anybody who's just joined us, thank you very, very much for tuning in. We're going to be taking you through all of the big changes to your money following the Chancellor's autumn budget today. If you've got any questions for us, please do post them in the chat. We will get around to as many of you as we can during this session. And Lorraine, we've not forgotten about you. We'll be coming on to the cost of living payments as well as soon as we can do. So Dan, just one more question if I can. What has the Chancellor said about the minimum wage today, please?
So let me get my crib notes. He has said it's going up, and it's going up by the largest amount it ever has. Now, in a way, that's not hard because the way inflation works, in cash terms, it's always going to go up by more and more. But it is a reasonably substantial rise. It's 92p an hour rise from £9.50 now to £10.42 next April. It's a slightly less of a rise, so it will go up to £10.18 an hour if you're 21 or 22, and it will go up to £7.49 if you are student age 18, 19, 20. However, so it's a big rise. It's almost with inflation, but whether in cash terms it's actually enough to deal with all these cost of living pressures is another thing, because of course people on the minimum wage, they need a very big rise kind of with inflation just to get by, and this rise is almost inflation but not quite. So it's one of those where it's like it's good news, but it's not the best news that you've ever heard.
Yeah, I'm with you. So it looks like good news from a distance. Now let's just move on and talk about something which is absolutely crucial to every household at the moment, and that is energy bills. So the government have announced that households will be paying higher energy bills on average from next year. So at the moment, the typical household's energy bills for the year are capped, and you've probably seen this figure of £2,500 a year, which is bandied around. And this is due to something called the Energy Price Guarantee. So this is a government promise that was meant to stop runaway energy bills from hitting prices, some people predicting £5,000–6,000 a year. So when the government brought this in, they said this will be a 2-year guarantee. The average household for average energy use will be paying around about £2,500 a year. Then they pulled the rug out from under that, and they very, very strongly suggested that it would not continue past this April, and that households would be kind of at the whim of whatever energy prices would otherwise have been at that point. And some experts were saying, we could be looking at £3,300 there or thereabouts. So they got an awful lot of flack for that. And today, the Chancellor has said that the energy price guarantee, it will be extended beyond April, but the figure will change from £2,500 to £3,000 a year for average use, and that will carry on for 12 months. Now, there's one very important thing to remember with this, which is these are just average figures. So much like the kind of Ofgem price cap, which the energy price guarantee replaced, that headline figure, which will now be £3,000 a year, you're going to see that bandied about everywhere. That isn't a total cap on your bills. It does depend on how much energy you use, and what's being capped is actually the unit rates for the gas and the electricity which your household uses, as well as the standing charges. So that means if you use more energy, you will pay more than that figure. Similarly, if you use less energy, your bill will be lower. And this will run at the moment until April 2024. But the government are very, very keen on making changes to this. And we're going to have to see if there's any more changes that happen, before that time. Now, Lorraine, I just wanted to come back to you and talk a little bit about cost of living. So yes, there is more help coming down the pipeline with cost of living payments. So these cost of living payments worth up to £1,350. That's a government figure. They're going to be coming from next year, but not for all households. So if you're on certain means tested benefits, that's things like universal credit, tax credit, pension credit, that's a £900 payment. If you're on certain disability benefits, so things like personal independence payment or PIP, that's £150. £300 to pensioner households who already get the winter fuel payment. So one thing that you'll have noticed on that list that we haven't spoken about is there was this year, it's already been paid out, a £400 energy bill cost of living payment, which is being made as a rebate to energy bills. Started in October. The way that most energy firms are doing this is that for 6 months from October, so running into 2023, your energy bill will be discounted by either £66 or £67 a month, and it will add up to a total of £400. That's if you're in a property and you're the person responsible for the meter in that property and paying the energy bills on that property. So the government have not announced plans to bring that back. Some of the things I've just run you through, you might think, okay, well, this sounds familiar. Basically, what they're doing is reheating some of the things which they've already brought in this year. So that first one, that £900 payment, that was the £650 payment this year. And they're going to up that to £900 for next year. Now, one thing, we're still working through some of the budget documents, and we're still, fine-tuning some of the detail on this. Anyone who's on tax credits and no other means-tested benefit will know that they got their payments later than everybody else on means-tested benefits this year. So one thing to look out for is if you are on tax credit, you may get your benefit payment later, your cost of living payment later next year. Once we find out more on that, we'll kind of let you know. So Dan, Dan, sounds like you're going to sort of chime in there.
I was going to say there's a problem here, isn't there, Sam, where because there's not this universal payment, there's a cliff edge where if you are incredibly poor and in the depths of poverty and on universal credit, you get £900. And if you're just claiming a few pounds a month in universal credit, you're right on the borderline, you get £900. And if you're working poor and you miss out on universal credit by a few pounds a month, you don't get any of this £900. It's all or nothing, isn't it?
It is. And I think that one thing, the government's kind of answer to that this year was, don't worry, guys, we've got the household support fund. This is a pot of money that if you're really, you've got to prove that you're, in their eyes, eligible for it. But potentially anybody could apply to their local council, or all the councils have got different criteria of how to claim. But again, there's not been a word on that being extended or more money being put into that pot for next year. And it does look very much like, there are a lot of people who are going to be just above that kind of eligibility criteria for payments like that £900. And, they're going to be struggling just as much as the person just slightly below them. But they'll get, at the moment, it looks like they'll get nothing. We hear from those people an awful lot in the comments when we've done Facebook Lives on the cost of living payment. They basically say, every single week people will say, well, what about me? What about people in what is often called, the sort of squeezed middle? Unfortunately, there's not an awful lot on the table from today, but we're going to take you through absolutely everything that we know about this, and any good news we can bring you, we will bring you. So talking of good news, unfortunately, there is some more bad news. Dan, can you talk us through changes to council tax, please?
Oh, yes, my favourite subject. So council tax has been going up and up and up. I mean, all taxes go up and up, but council tax especially. It's gone up by more than sort of £500 on the average bill every year since the Tories took power in 2010. And that's a big, that's a difference of kind of £1,400 to nearly £2,000. In April, pretty much guaranteed that the average Band D council tax bill, because council tax bills have a massive range depending on what sort of house you live in, where you live, whatever, will be above £2,000 for the first time. That's a real kind of like watershed moment, if you like. The reason for that, say the councils, is that the government is piling more and more pressure onto individual town halls to find the money for the things they need to fund to keep swimming pools and libraries and care homes and potholes and all the rest of it filled. Now, what's happened today is that Jeremy Hunt has said that instead of being able to raise council tax by 3% next year, those town halls will be able to raise it by 5%. And we have seen that before. There was one year, in fact, when they could even raise it by 6%. But it's just yet another big bill rise of, it could be £100 for a lot of people on their annual bill. That's going to just kick in on top of everything else in April at the same time as a lot of things are kicking in. So that's what he's announced. And interesting, he didn't say it properly in his autumn statement. He just had a tiny little thing where he said there will be more flexibilities in council tax. But when we went into the briefing, we have been told that the Treasury is assuming that 95% of councils are going to impose this full 5% rise. So it's a big rise coming to you next year.
It is, and I would expect a lot of councils to, put up council tax by as much as they think they can do and they need to. Obviously, as Dan says, a lot of these councils have been suffering cutbacks in the money that they get from government, and one of the only ways they can raise money themselves is by putting up council tax, and that's why we see some of the increases that we've been seeing, and quite possibly a bigger increase next year. Now, I just wanted to take a very quick question here from Jennifer Ford. Thank you very much for asking this, Jennifer. She says, to many families struggling to pay for gas and electricity, everything is going up, even food shopping. Now, can anything be done to raise our money higher for those on benefits? So thank you for that, Jennifer. There's probably two things I would say. The first thing is that depending on what benefit you are on, there should be a 10.1% increase next April to how much you get per year. And that was announced by the Chancellor earlier today. The other thing to do is to make sure that if you're on something like universal credit, which odds are you may well be, to make sure that you're getting the maximum possible allowance, and to make sure that you're claiming any other benefits which you're eligible for. What I'll do, if I can find it, we've actually written a story which went online on how to check that you're maxing out the benefits that you're eligible for, basically, because a lot of people, particularly if they've got children, are not claiming all of the benefits which they could potentially get. Perhaps any little that you could get extra. It sounds like it would be a big help. If I can find that story, I will post it to you. And thank you very much.
Chime in there with something.
Of course.
Sorry, deal with our tech, but there's one thing we're kind of almost makes it easier that it's a 10.1% rise this time, because it makes it quite simple to work out. This will be obvious probably to Jennifer and a lot of people on the call, but maybe not everyone. You just, if you want to work out how much it's going up by, you take whatever it is you get per month, so £849, and to work out how much extra you'll get, you just move that decimal point forward one, because it's divided by 10. So if you're on £849, you'll get about £84.90, or a tiny bit more per month. So that at least makes it a bit easier for everyone, no matter what their circumstances, to kind of try and figure out where the benefit payment's going. The one exception in universal credit is the housing allowance. That works slightly differently. So, it's not foolproof, but it helps.
There we go. Thank you very much. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, I just wanted to move on slightly to talk about another big change today from the Chancellor, and this was income tax and national insurance. So this is a bit of a complicated one to go through, but the thing to do, if you only keep one thing in mind from this, it's that more and more people are going to be paying more tax effectively. So what's actually happened? The Chancellor has announced a freeze on tax thresholds as part of the autumn statement today. So when this freezing of tax brackets, it's known as a stealth tax, because what it does, it pulls more people into paying higher taxes as wages and prices rise over time. And some of the changes which the Chancellor has made will be running in theory for many years. So this is what's happened. So at the moment, you get to earn up to £12,570 a year before paying any income tax, and that's called the income tax personal allowance. So that was already frozen for 4 years, running up to April 2026. that will now be stretched to April 2028. Another big change, this will only apply to workers on higher incomes. The 45p threshold, if you're a higher rate income tax payer, that means you're earning more than 150 grand a year, that has been reduced to £125,140. So if you earn more than that, you're taxed at 45p on the pound for everything you earn above that point. If you're paying the basic rate of tax, which is 20%, or 40% tax rate, those have both been frozen as they are, and that's going to carry on until 2028. Let's also talk about national insurance. So the threshold for when you start to pay national insurance is also £12,570 a year. That has also been frozen for another 2 years to April of 2028. So how much extra you'll be paying in tax depends on your salary. It also depends slightly on what happens with things like inflation over that time. But the big thing to bear in mind is that, you know, more and more people are going to be kind of swept up in this and end up paying more tax than they were. Now we've just got to, you know, we are. I'm slightly conscious of the time. There's a couple more things we'd really like to kind of get through with you. And Dan, one of those is social care costs. Can you talk us through what's changing with that, please?
Yeah, so Boris Johnson, when he pitched up outside Number 10 in 2019, feels like a million years ago, said, I have a clear plan prepared to deal with the social care crisis. 3 years later, I think it was, he unveiled that plan, and it was due to come in October 2023. And it means that from that date, you start a little counter if you're in care, and once you get to £86,000, you don't then have to spend any more for the rest of your life. That has now been delayed for 2 years, so it will only kick in October 2025. And I'm afraid, and this is a bit of a misery trip here, but just statistically, the very bleak reality of that is that if you have an elderly relative who is in care at the moment, there is a good chance that they will have passed away before they could ever benefit from that cap. And that's not just because it will take 2.5 years from, 3 years from now to kick in. It's because it takes a few years to actually notch up £86,000 of spending to get to that cap. And the life expectancy in care homes is, for reasons you might imagine, not fantastic. So it's extremely bleak for a lot of people. Jeremy Hunt claimed that he's delayed it because the councils wanted it to be delayed, but when you talk, because they weren't ready. But when you talk to the councils, they say, yeah, we're not ready, but we're not ready because we haven't had enough funding and preparation from the government. So there's a blame game going on here. That's what's going on, I'm afraid.
That's well, it's interesting to hear you sort of explain it so clearly, and I really wish that we had slightly better news for you today. Now, just to almost kind of take us to the end, I just wanted to talk slightly about alcohol duty. So the details on this, they're still being sketched out. As I said earlier, we're still going through some of the documents which have come out from the budget to work out precisely what this means for you. But in a nutshell, it looks like from next February, the rate of alcohol duty will go up. So this is something where the government taxes the producers of alcohol, and that tax is almost always passed on to consumers in the form of higher duty, higher tax when they're in pubs, restaurants, and even supermarkets, anywhere you might buy alcohol. It looks at this point like things like spirits, higher percentage alcohol will see a bigger increase in cost proportionally than lower percentage alcohols, things like beer and cider. What we're doing at the moment is working out precisely what that might look like, and then we'll be sort of writing stories about this so that you're crystal clear on what it means for you. But unfortunately, just to add another tax rise to the list, we're looking at a rise in alcohol duty too from next year. Now, I think that is probably, it's 3 o'clock, and that is almost everything we've got time for today. I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you found that helpful. Thanks also to Dan Bloom from the Mirror for all of his help today. And we'll be back next Thursday at 1 o'clock with another Cost of Living Facebook Live. I hope to see you all there. Thank you.